Hello, all. Thank you for joining us for episode 3 of the Opinionated Stands podcast. Please do me a huge favor and follow us on Twitter, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Google Play, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have any comments, questions, show ideas, please reach out. We always love to hear your feedback. Today, we've got a treat for you. My guest for the podcast today is a dear longtime friend, JJ Powell, and we're going to be talking about horse racing. It's going to be great. Let me give a warm and resounding welcome to my guest. Welcome, JJ. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Patrick. Thanks for having me today.
This is going to be fun. We get to talk about horses now. So let's talk about some horse racing.
Awesome.
You've been doing horse racing for a while in terms of like as a hobby, correct?
Correct.
Awesome. How did you get into beginning to follow horse racing?
I lived in Seattle for 20 years, and when I got out of college, my parents one day decided that we were going to go down to Emerald Downs and check it out. And so we ran down there and watched the horses and just had a really good time, and I just wanted to go back and keep going back and started to learn more and more from the people that were there and from the tools that they have available, and it was just a great time.
Okay, so how long ago was this that you like actively began wanting to go down?
I was about 20 years old, so it was about 13 years ago.
Okay.
I'm not going to give away my age. But
so that's a long time. Let's do. Okay, I can do the math and stuff. So that's a while. So you've been following it. Obviously, it's a very, very educated hobby for you, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I really got into it probably for, taking a little more time and whatnot before the races about 10 years ago.
Okay. So the main track was Emerald Downs. What's that like into, is it big horse racing? Is it going to be like the Kentucky Derby down there every day, or is it?
Well, people are always aware of the Kentucky Derby and the passion of the sport and whatnot, but really there's a lot more behind the scenes in the smaller tracks. Emerald Downs is a track that just runs during the summertime. They run about 70 to 80 days a year, and they really focus on the horses that are somewhere in a claiming race, which means that somebody else could actually purchase your horse during the race.
Okay.
And a lot of the people are really trying to make ends meet, and they have a love for the horses and a passion for the sport. And so it's a little different than the stakes of a Kentucky Derby,
Right?
But at the same time, it's really it's a passionate game.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to go down and spend a Saturday in the sunshine, right?
Very true.
So how did you So your parents just decided, hey, we're gonna go, and you enjoyed it. Like, what was your first bet that you made down there?
Yeah, I'm sure they had like some kind of promotional day, like get in free or something like that, And so we went down and hung out, and my first bet was I had like $2, and I made a $2 show wager on some horse that probably ran up the track and didn't even finish well. But it was the start of the excitement. I mean, the moment that those horses hit the top of the stretch and they're coming down the lane, and there's an excitement to it. Whether or not your horse is doing well, there's the passion in the air and the excitement all around. Everybody's got a different number that they're rooting for, and so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I always have the one that tends to be in the rear. Oh, it breaks late. It always breaks late, and his mother was a mutter.
Yep. I can understand that.
That's great. So, you've been doing this, obviously, you said, for about 13 years, just like actively as a hobbyist, but more so than some potentially. Like you play weekly occasionally, or you're at least always thinking about like the handicapping and stuff like that.
Sure.
What are some of the first things that you would recommend to people who are learning to bet horse racing or handicap horse racing? If they've never been to a track, it's the first time, so they can actually pick their first $2 show bet to actually pay off for them to win.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of those things where I really think that you need to like the horse. If the horse has good antics or there's something about the horse that you like. A lot of people bet gray horses. Some people think that the horse that shows a different kind of attitude compared to the rest of the horses is the one that's going to do the best. So it's really about finding your niche. Getting in there and seeing a horse that you like and believing in it. Once you start progressing in the handicapping world, there's tools out there, DRF, TBG, Twin Spires, different things like that give you the tools to be able to dive in a little bit deeper and maybe make an assumption or a guess based off of the information or the past performances.
Beyond my strategy of like going into the paddock and staring deeply into their soul to see which one's going to win.
Yeah, the average every couple days or every couple days a year horse player is only going to basically go to the track, get a program, see who the horses are. Maybe they like a name or something like that, or they've heard that some jockey's really good, and that's how they're going to bet. Then you have the more avid horse players that actually use the tools and try to develop theories as to why a horse is going to run well. And so it's everybody has a different stance on how they want to bet a race.
Right.
And so it's really just about finding your niche. I've really found that when you do start to dive into handicapping, watching video is really key. You can look at the numbers that are on the sheets and whatnot, but really watching that horse and seeing if you think that he had a chance to win last time and maybe he didn't, or maybe there's something that's not written in the past performances that you find just by watching the race.
Yeah,
So,
you see the narrative kind of unfold. Like actually, you could do as much as you can to write the best. Oh, this horse broke this way, this horse broke this way in writing, but until you actually see the past performance video, it's like, oh, that's what they mean by this. It may not be as exaggerated or less exaggerated than you thought of. So
yeah, I mean, I don't really want to get too deep into this because this is the first time we're really going through it, but maybe down the road we can definitely look at different angles and whatnot that I found to be successful.
yeah. And you've been playing, like, you play more than just your average, like, 2 times a year player, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've traveled to places and stuff. So what is your favorite track to play? What is your favorite track that you've been to? And like bucket list, what is your favorite dream track that you'd love to go to?
Sure. So I'm a West Coast guy. I really like the West Coast tracks. Obviously, Emerald Down is a place that I love to go.
Spent many an afternoons there.
Definitely. Santa Anita is a beautiful place. They've got a very interesting turf course that goes down a hill.
Okay, tell us about this in depth.
So it's a 6.5 furlong, or about 6.5 furlong race. It starts all the way at the top of the hill, basically outside the park almost, and works its way down. And actually makes a right-hand turn, which is something strange for
most American horses,
for American horse racing. And then actually crosses over the dirt path of the racetrack back onto the turf. But it's really one of the most exciting races just because there's so much that goes on from once they cross over the dirt path to when they hit the wire. And it's definitely probably the largest track in the West Coast.
Really? Okay.
And kind of the number one premier place to go.
Is it the largest because of distance for the downhill turf, or is it largest because the actual main track too?
No, I mean like largest in terms of the overall capacity of the crowd.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
It's just got that. It's that place that it's in LA. It's in the LA area, and so there's a lot of passion about it. And it's really the surviving racetrack in the Los Angeles area. So
after Hollywood Park is no longer.
Yeah, but I do like to go to Del Mar when they run down there. They only run 12 weeks out of the year, whereas Santa Anita probably runs 36 or so.
Okay.
And so because of that, it really people look forward to those races. It's right on the beach, about halfway between LA and San Diego, maybe a little closer to San Diego.
Yeah.
But it's really a beautiful track, and they're actually have the Breeders' Cup there, which is the kind of the mecca of horse racing for the older horses in the U.S. And that's going to be in November of this year.
That's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
I know that we're trying to plan on being down there for that. Yeah, when we went down to Del Mar, it's beautiful. It's a smaller track though.
Yeah.
But being right next to the beach and the ocean, it's like you can't ask for a more picturesque place to go watch live horse racing.
Definitely. So the favorite track I've been to is Del Mar, just because of everything else that's around it and the beauty of it. If I had to choose a track that I've never been to that I really want to go to, a lot of people would think it'd be Churchill Downs because that's where the Kentucky Derby is and whatnot. But it's actually Keeneland, which is also in Kentucky. It's in Lexington.
Yeah, it's in Lexington.
They only run there for about 5 weeks out of the year. It's really a breeders area for horse racing. A lot of horses are bred in Kentucky and born in Kentucky. And so Keeneland makes its name because of the sales that they have for horses, but the racing at Keeneland is incredible, and everybody, from Florida to New York to California, they always ship their horses into Keeneland for those short meets that they have there.
Yeah, that's cool. I think on my list, if I had to like pick one of the tracks to go to, the bucket list, it's like I've seen some of the West Coast here. I've seen some of the East Coast, not racing live, but I've been down to Gulfstream, and that's just a beautiful park, and we'll probably talk about that later here. For me, it's like going over international and like seeing some of what the Hong Kong Jockey Club is putting on at Happy Valley, those Happy Wednesdays where it's like $500 million is wagered by people. I mean, stuff like that is like, it's just, think of it as Breeders' Cups every Wednesday in terms of the amount of money and purses that are going through there. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, those are bucket list tracks. So which ones do you like to play? I mean, you played obviously Emerald since you were in Seattle for a while. But there's other tracks that you can play. You can use TVG, you can use any of the online services to take in, and we're not sponsored by TVG by any means, or any of the online services, but you can use them and basically if you wanted to play from your home, Australia or England horse racing, or somewhere in Oklahoma, you can do so. So what types of places do you like to play?
Like I said, I primarily will stick to the West Coast stuff. There are some smaller tracks on the West Coast, like Golden Gate, which is up in Northern California,
San
and
Francisco.
and also Los Alamitos, which is a small quarter horse / thoroughbred track, kind of in the Orange County area. And that's a really fun track, especially if you're just kind of learning, because the races don't go on forever. They really have shortened post times in between the races.
Okay.
And they're shorter races. And so the excitement builds up really quickly from when the gates open to when they hit the wire. And it's really a fun track just to go. And there's a lot of randomness that happens there. So really, if you're just that casual bettor that wants to pick a number, pick a jockey or something like that, it's really a good track to start with to have a little bit of fun.
Okay, so what's the difference between a quarter horse and a thoroughbred?
So quarter horses are different breeds than thoroughbreds. They're usually a little more stockier built. They usually have a bigger rear end to them and a little more power.
More junk in the trunk?
Yeah, they're quicker, but they don't have a lot of stamina to them. So if you take a quarter horse and a thoroughbred, the quarter horse is going to outrun the thoroughbred 9 times out of 10 for the first quarter mile or so, and then that's why they're called quarter horses.
Okay.
They don't really have that stamina to keep going.
Yeah, they just run themselves out. So,
yeah.
So the quarter horse races are obviously, they're not mile long races. Otherwise, you'd have some really, really tired horses at the end of it.
Yeah, the average quarter horse race is somewhere between 250 and 350 yards. They do go all the way up to 440, and actually they have one that's 870 or 660. But it's and those are yards.
Okay.
So it's a little bit less than a quarter mile, or a little bit less than a half mile. Excuse me. But so it's
so it's like drag racers versus NASCAR.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of making 4 left turns and then you're done.
Yeah.
Well, you just do one.
Just go right down the straightaway.
They're the top fuel horses of the horse racing industry.
That's correct.
That's awesome. So Los Alamitos, so Emerald, Golden Gate, those are some of the ones you play. That's cool. So what are some of your most memorable races, like over the 13-year period, or even longer than that you've either bet on or handicapped or seen in person?
Yeah, so the race that really comes to mind that I had a betting interest in and I won, and it was just a super, super exciting race, was the 2009 Long Acres Mile at Emerald Downs.
Okay.
Long Acres Mile is the culmination of the meet. It's really the big race that everybody looks forward to at the meet at Emerald Downs.
So it's the Kentucky Derby of Emerald Downs, pretty much.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
It's a mile long race. Long Acres Mile, and it usually has anywhere from 10 to 12 horses in it. And they ship in from out of town. So you might see horses from down in Southern California or from the Midwest or something like that. Then you always have some local horses as well. And this horse, Assessment, that won the race, he was a local horse. He had won a couple of races during the year in some of the key preps for the Long Acres Mile. But he was stuck on the outside. He was in the 12 post in a 12 horse field.
That's kind of not a good position to start.
Yeah, especially going a flat mile at Emerald Downs. It's a really tight turn into the first corner. And so he really had to use his speed early to get a good position.
Right.
And the jockey, Galen Mitchell, who's been a namestay at Emerald Downs for many, many years, and he actually has shown up recently in Southern California. He did a great job to kind of tuck him in and give him a chance, and as soon as they hit the top of the stretch, he just kicked on, and I think he went off at 11-1 or something like that.
Okay, so you're getting a long price on that.
Yeah, it was a great price for a horse that really had done nothing wrong. Just maybe some of the horses that came in probably had better resumes than him, and he was stuck on that outside post, and so I just remember, I was jumping up and down the whole way down the stretch, like he's going to get there, he's going to get there. And one of the cool things was the jockey had never won a Long Acres Mile before, even though he was in his 50s. And he actually stood up after the race and, started cheering and whatnot, like 10 yards after the wire, and just really was passionate and excited about it. And it was really a cool moment to see that guy who had put in so many hours, jockeys work 10 hours a day, even though we only see him for 4 hours, you know,
or for 2 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
You know,
and so it's just a great moment to see for that race.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. And then a couple of beats that really hurt were the 2010 Breeders' Cup. It was a battle between Blame and Zenyatta. Zenyatta was the undefeated mare.
The mega horse.
Yeah, she was 19 for 19 at the time.
Yeah, which you can, if you go to Santa Anita, you can see the like, was it the bronze statue out there of Zenyatta?
Yeah, they've got a bronze statue. That was her home track, was Santa Anita. She was a deep closer, and which made it really exciting. She was always near the back of the pack, but as soon as the running really started, when they hit the top of the stretch, she was flying, and she certainly had some close calls in her career, but she had never been beat before the Breeders' Cup Classic, and she's a mare taking on the boys, which doesn't happen a lot in our racing, but it's one of those things where she was just that good. She had actually won the Breeders' Cup Classic the year before.
Okay.
And
so had the distance, had it dialed in, could take and do it again. Yeah. It would be a repeat.
Yeah, a mile and a quarter was definitely in her wheelhouse, which is the distance of the Classic. And she turned for home, and Blame had a step on her, and she tried her heart out. They really separated themselves from the rest of the field, showing that it really was two class horses, going down the lane, as opposed to just somebody gutting it out or whatnot. And she just got nipped by a nose at the wire. And
don't you hate that?
Yeah, the announcer Trevor Denman, who calls down at Del Mar now, really, I mean, he set up the excitement, just that it was a match race and they were going to get there. And right when she lost, he was like, "Oh, I can't believe that Zenyatta just lost," because she'd never lost before. She had always shown that willingness to find the wire first, no matter what it took, And so it was really. It was looking back now, it was just a great race. At the time, It was like a super heartbreaker because you just wanted that mare to just keep winning and winning and winning.
Yeah, because you wanted the story to propagate to another, the next chapter. But it's like it's at the biggest race. You can't fault either of the horses right there. I mean, you run your heart out. It's an amazing race. You get beat by a nose. It's like we just saw something amazing happen.
Yeah, and they had already announced that it was going to be her last race ever, so everybody knew that it was kind of like her swan song, and they'd seen all that she'd done throughout her career, and it was just one of those memorable moments where you want them to go out on top, and unfortunately it just wasn't the case. She got beat by a nose. She had a big nose too, and she just couldn't get it there.
Couldn't get the tongue out or anything like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's got to be a tough beat.
Yeah. And then the other one that was really a tough beat for me was the 2012 Kentucky Derby. That was the race that I'll Have Another won and went on to win the second leg of the Triple Crown before getting injured.
Having to get scratched.
And going to stud. But the horse that I was on, that I was a believer in, was Bodemeister. And he was Bob Baffert trained. Bob Baffert's one of the best 3-year-old trainers in the nation. And the horse had just won the Arkansas Derby by 10 lengths or whatnot. And he really kicked out to a nice lead in the Kentucky Derby. He had a speed horse on the outside of him that he was getting pressed by a little bit. But at the top of the stretch, it really looked like he was kicking on and going forward. And really with like maybe 220 yards to go or so, like 1/8 of a mile, he just kind of flattened out. And I'll Have Another. I mean, no disgrace to the winner. He was motoring home.
Good horse too.
Yeah. He was motoring home, but Bodemeister just really had nothing left for those final 220 yards, and he went right by him, and he ended up finishing second. So no disgrace in what he did, and he's going to probably turn out to be a really good stallion as well. But it was just kind of one of those heartbreaking losses. If you would have asked me at the quarter pole who's going to win the race, it was Bodemeister, and at the 8th pole, it was like, I don't know.
Let's reassess this one here.
I'll have another guess.
Yeah, I'll have another one. I know that I follow horses. Obviously, I play with you for horse racing, and we've had many discussions about different horses and stuff. And we like our horses. Horses they're not necessarily our friends. Like, we're in it for the animals. We love it. It's a fun hobby. But we get attached to horses. So, what horses are you historically are your favorites?
I think it really goes down to Zenyatta, Bodemeister. Assessment. There's been some small claiming horses, the lower level horses at Emerald Downs.
What was that one that we used? I'm blanking on the name.
I don't know.
At Emerald.
There was one horse that my dad and I follow called Yes Bay.
Okay.
He was just kind of a gritty horse. He could win at any kind of distance, and we always used to like him. There was another horse, one of the first bets that my dad and I made together was on a horse called Gallant Sun.
I remember that.
Yeah, and he ended up winning the 2-year-old futurity race at Emerald Downs that year, and went on to win probably 10 or 12 races in his career. He really had a good career, but he was one that I always followed. They sent him down to Northern California after his 2-year-old year, and he really prospered and continued to have a really good, successful career. In the quarter horse world, if you ever heard of He's a Dash of Fire. He's a Dash of Fire is right now the number 1 quarter horse in the world. and he is just a fireball.
Yeah.
He can get out of the gate well, and he can motor down the course. And he's actually he's bred in Washington, which is kind of weird.
That's cool.
You don't really have many quarter horses that are bred in Washington.
They've only done one or two. Like they only do the quarter horse or the sprints at Emerald occasionally because it's not that big of a track to do it.
Yeah, it's not that big of a track. It's just that there's not really been a niche for quarter horse racing in the Washington area, and so they run it they one or two races every Sunday or so at the Emerald Downs meet now, but it really hasn't grabbed on and taken a hold like they kind of hoped it would. I think they kind of hoped they could get a couple races for quarter horses each night, Yeah. But it just really hasn't turned out that way.
I'm trying to think, since like we're obviously here in Chicago recording, we have a couple tracks that are local, Hawthorne, and then we also have Arlington Park. I don't think there's any quarter horse racing there. Most of the stuff that they try to do is longer distances. And then also bring in some, since it is a premier track, bring in some of the European horses to do some of the turf courses. Like I gotta say, like from the horse's perspective, from me, like some of them might sound a little cliche, but like the gray horses, like if you took and look at Frosted, hasn't had a huge career in terms of like the Triple Crown wins or anything like that, but it's always in the money, and it's a beautiful looking horse right there. And then I can go back to, California Chrome when he first started was an amazing horse, and it still is an amazing horse. Had some health problems, but that's been always one of my favorites from day one, just from the story, because it comes out of Los Alamitos, right?
Yep, that's his home base.
That home base, and we'd been there just prior to that. It's just like it was really interesting to see that story fold, because Los Alamitos is a nice track, but it's not one of like the premier California ones that you'd think that this like mega horse would come out of.
Not only that, but he's a matchmaking nightmare. I mean, his mom never won a race. Right. His dad is a low money earner sire in California, and his dad is primarily known for horses that are 6 furlongs or 3/4 of a mile or less, and his mom really didn't have on paper anything that was going to suggest that he could even go a mile and 1/8, a mile and a quarter or whatnot. And they put the two together, and he ran the King's Bishop back in 2013 at Santa Anita, and really showed a lot of grit and kicked on at the top of the lane and pulled away. And that was really kind of the coming out party of California Chrome. And then he went on to win the Kentucky Derby and win the Preakness, and ended up losing in the Belmont there. But it was one of those things where he definitely turned into that special horse, and everybody tried to figure out how that mating made him to who he was, And a lot of credit goes to the ownerships and to the trainer, Art Sherman, and his staff. They really did a good job of taking care of the horse when they had the opportunity.
Yeah. And I think obviously the next one that I have that is a tried and true one. It could be cliche because he did so many good things for horse racing, but I was on him early on prior to the Kentucky Derby when he won it. Then he went on to win a bunch of more stuff. I can't remember the horse that, like, there were 2 horses at the Derby time. Was it last year? Yeah, when American Farrar was there. And for that first week prior to it, I remember you and I were talking back and forth, and I'm like, dude, this guy at 4-1, I'm loving this. This horse has got it. He's coming out, and he can fly. So I went heavy on the nose on that and just bet everything on the win, and came out and won, and just had a beautiful race, and then continued to demonstrate just this amazing, just being this amazing stud. And he was like, I think it makes me excited for the way horse racing can go in the future. I mean, he did something that no one has done in how many years? How many years prior to it? So, like, American Farrar for me is always going to be, and it's a beautiful looking horse too. Yeah. So
yeah, American Farrar is pretty special. The first Triple Crown winner in 43 years or whatnot, 40 years, and he really he had that stalking speed where he could stay close all the time. But he also had the ability to finish. That race was really dominated by West Coast horses. You had Dortmund, and you had Firing Line, and you had American Farrar that all finished in the top 3.
Did Dortmund go off as the favorite?
I think it was actually one of the East Coast horses, by one of the Pletcher horses that went off favored.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, but it was one of those things where American Farrar just showed the grit. He was 3 wide going into the top of the stretch, which is usually not a good place to be, especially since he's been 3 wide the whole way around, and kicked on, and the the call by Larry Colmus at the Belmont when he was going to win the Belmont by 6 or 7 lengths. Larry Colmus basically had the entire stretch to be able to talk about how great of an achievement this was, and that's 20 seconds or so, and so he really had his 20 seconds of fame right there to tell everything about American Pharoah and how great it was and how great it was for the sports world and the horse racing world. Horse racing really needed a Triple Crown champion.
Yes, it did.
It was getting to the point where everybody would think about, okay, this horse couldn't win the Belmont or won the Kentucky Derby and they got injured or something like that. And so there were always excuses.
Close. Yeah, so close, but never anybody that was able to just like get over that hump. It was like we had seen it like so many times, and then like there was that big Brown, and in the Belmont just comes around the quarter pole and just gets pulled up. And I mean, I know that your dad loves it because they hit that super amazing trifecta.
Yeah.
That paid out stacks. But yeah, we get so close every single time. I think it was great to bring in people. When American Pharoah did win the Triple Crown, it brought in people like us, like others of us, our peer group, to take and say like, well, this is fun. It rejuvenated what had been like lacking in terms of interest and popularity.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So transitioning over to it, what do we look for in 2017? What are your thoughts on the Derby prep schedule coming up? We have the Kentucky Derby, obviously, and the Triple Crown stuff there. What are your thoughts on what we can see? I know it's the way too early Mel Kiper draft, but who do we think we're going to see in there? What races? What do you think about the point system too? Because I know that changed a few years ago, and it changed how the fields look.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to dive into who to kind of look at as an up and comer. I think there's a lot to kind of sort itself out over the next couple months.
We'll look at those in more detail over the next few months. But the point system does play into effect. Like
very true. There's actually a Derby prep coming up tomorrow, the Smarty Jones Stakes down at Oaklawn. And after Bodemeister, and I'll have another ding dong down the stretch in the 2013 Kentucky Derby. They changed the point system the following year. It used to be that it was based on you could get in the race whoever had the 20 highest earnings in graded stakes races going into that point. But one thing it didn't take into consideration was whether those stakes races were at shorter distances, meaning sprint distances,
right,
or if they were at longer distances. And so what they did with the point system was they took races that were from a mile or longer and assigned points to them based on what time of the year those races occurred.
Okay.
Theoretically, you want a horse that's peaking going into the Kentucky Derby.
Right. You want the people that are like any sport, like going into the March Madness, like to take a different analogy, you want the streaky team.
Yeah, exactly. And so what happened in the past, and maybe this is why the Kentucky the Triple Crown was hit, was because of the fact that it took out these speedball types that would set it up for closers because they really only had one gear to go and they were used to going 3/4 of a mile instead of a mile and a quarter.
Right.
And so I don't want to say that it really rechanged the game, but what it did is it made it so that those horses that were peaking at the right time, whether they had started once or twice or 10 times, if they did well in those final preps right before the Kentucky Derby, they deserve a starting spot, whether or not there was enough money that they had earned to get in there, because not all races are the same purse.
Exactly.
And so you found that some horses went to certain races because of the fact of the purse and not because of the, just maybe they want to stay at home, but the home track doesn't have the same purse that the one, 4 or 5 states up the road does have.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to your point of if they want to run a 3/4 mile, all the Derby races or all the Triple Crown races are well over a mile. So a 6 furlong horse specialist is not going to, it's just going to get completely romped. They're going to be in these races. They're going to be that rabbit out there to set the field. And then these closers will just stalk them. So now that you have some of those horses that are those speedballs out of the race, it's more of an even race going into it. So
yeah. And I definitely don't think you're going to wait another 40 years for a Triple Crown winner. I'm not saying it's going to happen this year or the next year. But I think you're going to find probably within the next decade that there'll probably be another Triple Crown winner. There are special horses out there. There have been special horses that haven't won the Triple Crown. It's not necessarily that you're the best horse if you do win the Triple Crown. Sometimes it's a matter of luck. But those are really good horses that end up at least winning the first 2 legs of it,
Right.
And at least getting to Belmont for that 1.5 mile track.
It's ridiculously hard to win a horse race.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and if you're a Triple Crown winner, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be the Breeders' Cup Classic winner either. Like,
Not except for when American Farrar ran.
Right. I mean, and that's a 3-year-old.
That was the Grand Slam.
Yeah, that's a 3-year-old beating all the big dogs and all of the horses. So that just shows you again how special of a horse that was.
Yeah, no doubt.
But you know, they're 3-year-olds, they're younger. So does a Triple Crown winner, or even a horse that goes in and wins early on in their career, like in their 3-year-old season, do you expect them to be in that Grade 1 stakes kind of like field for the rest of their career and be focused on being in the Breeders' Cup Classic or the Turf Classic or the sprints? Does it equate, or is it like?
Yeah, because it kind of goes back to finding your niche, right? As a handicapper, we try to find our niche. You know, what are we good at, and stick to it. That's the way to make money, right? So when it comes to horse racing, it's the same thing. If you have a horse that's really good at one thing, keep doing it.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to keep winning. Look at California Chrome. They don't turn it back to sprints at all. They tried him on the grass one time. He won. It wasn't against the quality field.
Right.
But you know, it basically, if you find a niche for a horse, you should keep doing that, and that's the way to make money. Owners are out there to make money,
right?
You know?
It's a business to them.
Yeah,
too. They love the animals, but at the end of the day, you have to take and turn this investment into return.
And classic races in North American horse racing are at distances of 1.1 miles, 1.25 miles, and whatnot. And so those are usually the most prestigious. They're also the ones that have the most dollars that go along with them.
Okay.
And so there's really. If you have a horse that can win a Triple Crown race, I would certainly think that that's the way you want to go till he doesn't win a couple more.
Yeah, until he proves that, and then drop them down into different stakes levels at that point.
Well, usually at that point they'll end up retiring the horse just because there's so much money in the breeding world.
Right. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface of what that impacts for horse racing.
Yeah, and I have a negative stance on breeding just for the pure purpose that. Some of the horses do get taken away too early from the track, and one of the things with North American horse racing is that some of these field sizes show up really small, and it's really because there's not enough horses that are bred, and some people think that by having more stallions and more mares that do breeding that it's going to raise the population, but I also think that when you've got some good ones that maybe aren't the best and whatnot, we should run them, and let them win and let them do good, and you can increase their value. Sure, there's the opportunity or the instance where somebody could get hurt or whatnot, but I think that's the same with every sport out there.
Right.
People don't retire in basketball because they might get hurt. Yeah. Now in the NFL, sometimes they do just because of the concussions and whatnot. But
you're starting to see a little bit of that in college football with the draft and the money coming there. But that's we could talk about that for days probably, and many, many other episodes here.
Yeah.
Want to keep it back onto like the 2017 and what we're like looking forward to like in the future, because I have a feeling this is going to be a fun year for horse racing. I think we're going to see an interesting Derby prep season. I have no clue who to pick in any of these races coming out, but what are the key races that we should look for in this Derby prep season to start to see the Kentucky Derby and the Triple Crown field start to solidify?
Well, the biggest races for the Derby in terms of points are the races right before the Derby, about a month to a month and a half before. They start out with the UAE Derby, which is in Dubai, and the winner of that gets 100 points. And I think in the past it's been somewhere around 40 points or so to get into the Derby. So anybody that wins one of those major preps, even some of the 50-point races, should assure a starting spot. But you only get one winner in those races, right? Whereas if you get second, even in some of these major preps, then you end up with 40 points right there. And so theoretically, you should have hopefully a couple more points from previous races and whatnot, and be able to solidify your spot in the Kentucky Derby. There are some races that I think are more key than others in those 100-point systems. The Florida Derby, which is where Nyquist ran last year and ended up winning the Kentucky Derby after that.
Big race that comes out of Gulfstream.
Yep. The Santa Anita Derby, that's down in California, and that's always been a prestigious race in terms of getting the horses the prep that they need into the Kentucky Derby.
Right.
Not only do you want to give them a prep and get them going, but you'd like to get them to, maybe learn a little something during that race as
Right.
well. So
I mean, it's a great track. The surface is very much similar to what you'll see at Churchill, and it happens, the first or what is it, that first week of April. So the winner of that can then, start to ship back, because if you won that, you're in.
Yeah, definitely.
You if you take second in that, you're probably close to being in. So that at that point you can start to ship back and prepare for the transition, get the horse over to Churchill to take and start to train over that surface as well.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I thought has been kind of a newer scheme with this point system is to try to get some points early on in the season so that you can give your horse the winter or the early spring off and get them started, in kind of that March to April timeframe.
Right.
So that they're not overused by the time they get to the Derby, and that they have a little bit more in the tank after the Derby as well.
Right. Because it's, what is it, 5 weeks after it to the Preakness, and then 5 more weeks to the Belmont?
It's 2 weeks to the Preakness, and then 3 weeks until the Belmont. So
Sorry, I was getting
the total of 5 weeks.
Yeah, I was getting I was trying to figure out the holidays, because it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, and then
Father's Day is a culmination.
Yeah,
so.
And something in the middle.
I'm
horrible with the holidays right now. So obviously with these 100 points, 40 points, and so on, it really, these owners have to think of it almost as having kind of like a meta strategy of going into picking which race they want to go into. Because, if you're going to Turfway or Gulfstream or Aqueduct or Keeneland or Santa Anita or Oaklawn, you have to ship your horses around, and you have to have them fresh. And horses aren't like humans. Anybody can get sick traveling around the country, let alone just like these horses. So how do you take in, as an owner, what strategy would you try to do if you had a up and coming 3-year-old?
I think the one thing that I've learned over the years is the horses that don't have a plan don't do well when they get shipped somewhere. If you hear a trainer say, here's our schedule for the Kentucky Derby, we're going to go to this race, and then we're going to go to this race, and if all goes well, we're going to go to the Kentucky Derby, then they already have their mindset of what they need to do to get the horse to the first race, and to get him to the second race, and to get him to the Derby. When you start hearing, okay, this horse was going to go here, but now he's going to go here, and yada, 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 it's kind of like a crapshoot. The horses usually don't run well because they don't have the proper preparation. Sometimes they run a different week than they were going to run. And sure, just like you said, anytime that you're shipping to a different part of the country, I know from the travel I do that, you don't always feel the same at every single climate, you may come out of California where it's nice and sunny and head over to New York where it's snowing, know?
Exactly.
And so you just kind of have to see what happens with that.
Yeah. And obviously one of the key races always is going to be the Arkansas Derby, because that's the last ditch effort for people to get in. That's the last, what I consider the 100-point premier race to get in for it. I can't remember who came out of the Arkansas Derby last year.
Last year was American Pharoah.
Yep, exactly. I did remember that.
Yeah. And then also...
I was teasing you.
And then also you had Bodemeister a couple years ago that was also... That's Bob Baffert at Oaklawn Park is kind of incredible. I think he's got like a 65% win percentage in the 3-year-old stakes races. And so when Baffert ships over there, he's got a plan and a purpose, and usually those end up being the horses that he sends to the Derby.
Yeah, it's a tactile decision, because you think about it, Arkansas to Kentucky is not that far. If you're gonna have a horse that's doing it, you can get your horse a week later run. Mm-hmm. You take and get them already on the eastern part of the United States. You don't have to ship them from Santa Anita. I think it's a great move for it, and definitely see quality horses coming out of there. So outside of Derby prep, we know that there's races that continue to go on. I mean, you could be excited about the Long Acres Mile this year, or other races, a Breeders' Cup. What races are you excited for in 2017? Derby prep not withholding.
Well, coming up, you got the Pegasus World Cup. It's the first ever Pegasus World Cup. It's a $12 million race, which is the richest race in the world. Each owner is required to put up $1 million for their starting slot. And they're not actually even required to pick a horse until the entries are drawn, or right before the entries are drawn.
Yeah,
and they're just basically buying their slot in it, and then they could sell some of those shares or whatnot to somebody else, or to an owner of a horse to get the horse in there. But it's really turning out to be what should be a 2-horse race, and that's between Arrogate, who won the Breeders' Cup Classic this past year, and then also California Chrome.
Well, let me tease this a little bit here. So
Sure.
the Pegasus is going to be on Saturday, January 28th. It's the final race of a card at Gulfstream that looks like it's going to be 7 races, 7 different races valuing from $125,000 purse to a $12 million purse. Some of the key things is it's a mile and an eighth on the dirt. $7 million goes to the winner. You're going to be able to watch that on NBC. Again, NBC's not paying us to say that, but the contenders that they have coming in, as of this Fox Sports article that I'm reading right now, is Arrogate, who 2016 Travers Stakes and the Breeders' Cup Classic winner last year, beast of a horse, Breaking Lucky. Then we have California Chrome, which we've all heard of, who is a mega horse right now. Aragon, Gunrunner, Keen Ice, Neolithic, Shaman Ghost, War Envy, and War Story. And there's going to be more to come as we get closer. Like, again, so what do you think this is going to be more of a 2-horse field?
Yeah, I think ultimately it is. I mean, the match race that Arrogate and California Chrome had in the Breeders' Cup Classic this past November was incredible. Both horses got really high speed figures compared to what anybody in this field has ever ran. And they both have kind of tactical speed to be able to distance themselves from the other horses in the race. So I'm sure everybody's, a lot of people out there will be trying to beat them and whatnot, or maybe they'll just be trying to beat one of them with the other one or whatnot. But it's California Chrome's final race of his career. He's going to go off to the breeding shed afterwards, and it very well could be Arrogate's as well. I mean,
you put that win on your resume. That's a big thing to have in terms of the breedings.
Well, yeah, especially after winning the Breeders' Club Classic at the same time, So the one thing going for California Chrome in this race, as opposed to the Breeders' Cup Classic, is that it's a mile and an eighth, so it's a little bit shorter, which should enable him to have a little bit left in the tank, for that stretch drive. Whereas he just kind of looked like he ran out of gas at the eighth pole in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Right.
So, but and a mile and an eighth could bring other horses into this picture as well, as opposed to a mile and a quarter, which kind of tends to distance the runners out based on class and skill and whatnot.
Yeah, and then we're going to be at the end of January. It's going to be South Florida. It's going to be Hallandale Beach. That's where Gulfstream is, and it's going to be hot. So, I mean, these horses could just get tired. You have to ship them. And this isn't a race that's going to be in the Derby prep. This is just this is anybody can enter if you chalk up the money for it.
Yeah, and I think it's somewhere between $5 and $6 million to the winner, which is
this article is saying $7 million, so that's going to get a lot of people to want to go for that. One of the things to think about with California Chrome, like if you're going to look at this horse going here, like I saw a video that he shipped yesterday, or was taking something over the track, taking a trip over the track yesterday. People can look at his works and sometimes remember what happened after the Triple Crown season he had. And he lost the Belmont, and then he kind of got sick and kind of was shipped around everywhere. What do people need to know going into this final race with him? Is he in that same where he's not doing as well? Is he a stronger horse now? Because I know for a while it seemed like there was disorganization in his camp.
Yeah, I think that ship has been righted. The previous ownership partners had kind of been indecisive as to what they wanted to do, but they wanted to give California Chrome the world and give him the tour, and take him to all these different places. And so after they sent him to the Dubai World Cup a couple years ago, they wanted to send him to Royal Ascot, which is one of the premier grass racing festivals over there in England. And he got sick. He lost some weight. He had a little bit of a bruise issue on one of his feet, and he wasn't able to make the race, and really was off for a year while he was trying to get better and trying to get him back into racing shape. And so now that he's back in America and he's under the care of the same trainer now that he's always had through the Kentucky Derby and whatnot, he is a much better horse. He's a stronger horse. He has one tendency where he doesn't like to race inside of horses, and that kind of seems to be his nemesis usually. But I think the jockey's well aware of it now, and so he does a pretty good job to keep him on the outside.
And who's going to get the mount again?
Victor Espinoza,
who's
been a money rider the last couple of years. He was the jockey aboard American Pharoah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, like I can't say anything bad about Victor. I think he's one of the best jockeys. He gets these mounts because he knows what he's doing. And any of the races that I've seen recently with him on major mounts, he's ridden them to perfection. So
yeah, he really does a good job.
yeah, I think that's amazing. So basically what you're saying for the Pegasus, if you want to take and do your homework, start really looking and digging into the 2016 Breeders' Cup Classic and see how that broke down, and then start adding other horses back into the field. Because California Chrome needs to look at Keen Ice. There's a couple of these horses that were on the Kentucky Derby prep last year that might be someone's to look at. Like, you never know, right? You never know how people are going to respond or the horses are going to respond in this race.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. So what are some other races? The Pegasus is coming up now, but 2017 just got started. We got to have some more excitement here.
Yeah, we've got the obviously we got the Kentucky Derby and the classic races that'll come up in May and June. Then you get into some of the 3-year-old late summer races, and those are usually exciting. That's where Arrogate got his start before winning the Breeders' Cup Classic last year. The Breeders' Cup Championships are in November down in Del Mar,
right?
Like we talked about earlier, and so those are something to look forward to. And really, there's just a lot of fun racing during the summertime.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed when I look at the ADW websites out there is that the amount of tracks that run during the summertime is like double from the tracks that run in the wintertime.
Well, everybody likes to go have fun out in the summer.
Exactly. So whether you live in Illinois or you live in Florida, or you live in New York, you live in California or whatnot, there's a track for you,
right.
So it doesn't have to be a premier track that you go to go check it out or whatnot. You can literally go down the street a lot of times and go for a night and have a good time, and bring your wife, girlfriend or whatnot, or bring your husband, and check it out and have a good time.
Yeah, I mean, I love going out to Arlington. It's a fun blast. I mean, we're in Chicago. You take the train out, and they let you drink on the train, and you get to go out there and have a rowdy time. It's a great day spent out there at the track. I think one of the things that I'm looking forward to is obviously Arlington Park is the home track here for me, where I go to occasionally. Very unsuccessful better at that track. Can't pick a winner, but I love going out there having a good time. And the Arlington Million in August is always a premier race for us here. Usually it's either the most gorgeous sunny day or it's just downpouring and they take it off the turf. But that's a race that we've seen with the Pizza Man winning a couple years ago and all that stuff. I think, for me, I'm looking forward to the Breeders' Cup class, or the Breeders' Cup as well at Del Mar this year. How is the Breeders' Cup different than the other horse racing, like the premier sessions of horse racing? Because I know that some people might understand what the Kentucky Derby weekend has, but how's the Breeders' Cup different than that?
It's a bunch of Grade 1 races, which are the most premier races, and they're different distances and age groups and categories and even surfaces. You have some races on the turf and some on the dirt. Sprints, which are less than a mile, and route races over a mile. And so there's 13 different races over the course of 2 days that make up the actual Breeders' Cup. There are other undercard races that go on as well. But it's something that you get horses from all over the nation, and in the case of some of the turf races, you get horses from all over the world.
Right.
So you really get to see those champion horses that have excelled in their niche or their group that they usually run in, and now they're ready to take on the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's the all-stars of the all-stars in the best of their field, for 2 days.
And it's perfect timing because it gets right before horses go off to stud or go. There's actually a Keeneland sale or an OBS sale that's right after the Breeders' Cup, like a week later, and so some horses go into that sale. And just by winning a Breeders' Cup race, now they're going to fetch somewhere close to $1 million as opposed to $250,000 or whatnot. So it really is perfect timing to have those Breeders' Cup races right before kind of the breeding season starts.
Yeah,
and horses increase their value during that as well.
That's cool. So as we close and do a couple of little like recap and summary stuff, so the Pegasus is obviously coming up. That's going to be a big race. That's going to be televised on NBC. How do people start to learn to handicap a little bit before that race, or what should people do? Should they go onto a website and just deposit money, or what do you recommend?
No, I definitely wouldn't recommend just going on a website and depositing money. But what I would say is, if you've never really gotten into horse racing before, read some articles. There's a lot of stuff out there that you can read about the different horses and whatnot. And really, if you're gonna bet on those races or whatnot, I would definitely recommend watching them on TV, so that you can kind of see the horse. And like I said earlier, find a horse that you really think looks good. That it's presenting itself well. If it's got a straight coat of hair, not wishy-washy. There's no lather coming out of the horse or whatnot. The horse isn't rambunctious. You want their ears pricked forward and whatnot, kind of displaying that they're thinking about things and whatnot. So it's really, find a horse that interests you and go with it.
Right.
Upsets happen all the time in this sport, and so just because somebody's a favorite doesn't always mean that they're going to win. And so I really think that the best way to do it is to be comfortable with your bet.
Right. Be comfortable with it. Like if you don't want to put money on it, you can still do all the handicapping, watch the race, and know that you picked the winner or picked the horse. Just get the level of comfortability for it. Just play $2 if you choose to do that. Play whatever. It should be an entertainment thing. It should be for fun. It's not to be for necessarily hitting it rich and starting to buy your horses. But that's the end goal that we all have out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that whether you bet $2 or $200, it's exciting. And so it's fun to watch the race itself. And there's a lot of people out there that will just watch the races, and you may not bet on every race because you don't really have an opinion. And so, but the race itself might be really, really exciting. Right. I've seen horses that run slow races where everybody finishes close at the wire, and sometimes those can be more exciting than the quick races where somebody blows away the rest of the field.
Right.
And so it's a really passionate sport. The fans there are excited, the trainers are excited, the owners are excited, the jockeys are excited sometimes. So it's really a sport that allows you to reach out and see the different aspects of it. They're all right in front of you.
That's cool.
There's nothing hidden.
That's cool. I'd like to open up the floor for you to have like any comments, questions, anything you want to add to the show. I know that we've talked about potentially coming back and doing more of these episodes where we dig deeper into specific races and horses in the future. Do you have anything you'd like to add? The floor is yours, JJ.
How did you get into horse racing?
Oh, how did I get into horse racing? This was really, really young. My grandfather took me, my cousins, and my brother out to Arlington Park. We used to live in the suburbs, and it used to be less than 10 minutes away from the house. So there was a Saturday that we went out there with him, and he took us all there, and he asked us, which horse do you like in this race? And we didn't know anything, and we picked the 5-horse because we liked the green color on the 5-horse. And so he went and put $5 on the 5-horse for us as kids. He obviously took and did all the money and stuff like that, but then we won. The 5-horse hit, and it was like, okay, we made $15, the total of us, and then he took us out for ice cream. So it was that moment right there that was what got me into it, and always going to, like, the track was always something that was in reach of us. So
sure.
That was the first moment for me that got me into horse racing, and what's kept me into it is like, yeah, maybe I'm not making money off of it. It's a fun experience to go, and it brings family and friends together. It's a great place for you to go to just experience it. You don't have to be an expert for it. So that's what keeps me going for it.
Yeah, the reason I asked that was just because everybody has their own experience as to how they got into the sport. Maybe it's because you listen to a podcast with two guys, right? But at the same time, maybe it's because your friend goes one time and you tag along with them or whatnot. And so it's really something that you can have fun at, whether you really want to get invested into it or whether you just want to go have a good time, drink a couple beers or whatnot, and enjoy the sunshine out there, And so I really challenge people just to go experience it and have fun. And you may have a story that you're going to tell 20 years later, You may have a bad story that you're going to tell 20 years later. We sure hope not. But at the same time, there's experiences out there for everybody. And you can certainly challenge yourself to go try it one time.
Right. That's absolutely correct. And I think that's a great way to challenge all of you guys in the New Year's to go just take a look at it. It's fun, and watch it on TV. It's a good time. Plus, at the end of the day, if you come in close to hitting that winner and it's a photo finish, it's an amazing feeling. If it's
sometimes you have to wait a long time for that photo sign.
Yeah, sometimes you got to wait a long time. But if it's $20, $2, or if it's $2, $20, or $200 on that bet, it's just exhilarating. Again, thank you, JJ, for coming and being on the show. I think that we've exhausted our talks for this first day, but we will be talking about more horse racing on this show or another show as we go along in the future. Thank you again for being on the Opinionated Stance podcast. Thank you again for listening to the Opinionated Stance podcast. My name is Patrick Farrar. This is JJ. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please send them to us. We'd love to hear any show ideas, anything like that. Thank you again. Have a great evening. Bye.
See you guys.